So guys, today on Sports Central, we'll be going over our next schedule preview this 2020 offseason, and it will be over the Maryland Terrapins. And this is a team that was really interesting in the 2019 season. If you remember, they started out on fire heading into the season. Of course, if you remember, they actually got a ranking, I believe, before week 3, or it could have been week 4, but I think it's week 3. And this team was looking like they were going to be a huge surprise in the Big Ten, but nonetheless, it didn't really turn out that way. They absolutely collapsed as the season went on. They finished off the season 3-9. But moving on to 2020 is what we're doing here today. We're going to be going over a few players that this team will be returning, who they're going to be losing, and also going over their schedule for the first time this offseason. Starting off with the games that Maryland has had since November, we start off with the Michigan game on November 2nd. They lost that one 7-38. Then they had a game that most Maryland fans, I bet, want to forget. They lost in Columbus at Ohio State 14-73. Absolutely terrible loss there. And they also had a really bad loss to Nebraska, and that quite possibly was their ugliest one. Of course, Nebraska was really not all that special of a team last season. They lost that one 7-54. And then they lost to Michigan State by only 3. So that certainly could have been a good game to finish off the season, a win against Michigan State. But yeah, they ended up losing that one 16-19 in the end. Between the trend for Maryland this season, they were 3-5 between September and October, and then 0-4 between November and the postseason. The returning production for Maryland isn't very good. Of course, they returned their top 19 quarterback Josh Jackson, which he had over 1,200 yards of passing, as well as 12 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. So he had a decent season, nothing special, but he was decent. And they returned their second quarterback in Tyrell Pigrom. Of course, he had over 700 yards of passing as well, as 3 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. So yeah, both those quarterbacks split time this season. And they lose their top running back McFarland to the NFL draft, and quite possibly he was the best player of this offense this entire season. He had 740 yards as well as 9 touchdowns, and so that's going to be a tough loss there. And they also lose their second running back, Javon Leak, which he had 790 yards too, as well as 8 touchdowns. So they're losing 2 really good players for this offense. That's going to be really tough to deal with next season. They do return all of the receivers for the most part. They return their top wide receiver in Dante Demas, which he had over 600 yards of receiving as well as 6 touchdowns. So that's going to be a good player to return. But really, this offense is losing a ton. They also lose 2 offensive linemen, 2 defensive linemen, and 2 linebackers on the defense, as well as 2 in the secondary too. So yeah, lots and lots of tough losses for Maryland. They lose 6 on the defense. That is a really high number. Typically, you'll see 4, maybe 5 on average losses on the defense, but for Maryland, they're up to 6. So that's going to be really tough to deal with. And we know how Maryland's defense was towards the end of last season. It was not good. I mean, they allowed 120 points between Nebraska and Ohio State combined. That's not a stat that you want to have. But yeah, moving on from Maryland, it's going to be tough to say whether they can make a bowl game in 2020. I think right now it's not looking very good for that. But moving on to your schedule, here's what we got. We start off with September 5th. Maryland's got Towson at home. You also have Northern Illinois at home the next week. Then it's on to West Virginia on September 19th. You got Minnesota and Indiana in the preceding weeks. And then you got Northwestern on the road, Wisconsin and Rutgers at home. Then it's on to Ann Arbor to play Michigan. You got Ohio State at home, then Penn State on the road, and then Michigan State to finish off the season at home. And quite honestly, for Maryland, it's really tough to give them any projected wins on here. Of course, once again, we'll be going over all of the games once we get into the summer. We're just going to give you guys a couple wins and losses right now. But yeah, I'm going to say Towson is the only guaranteed win for Maryland this season. Northern Illinois, I considered putting under the projected win category. But I think Maryland has a good chance of winning that one. That's very winnable, but I'm not going to say it's guaranteed by any chance. But yeah, you got West Virginia, of course. That could be another winnable game. Of course, West Virginia was a bit down last season. That'd be a good road win, though, for sure. But otherwise, this schedule isn't absolutely terrible. I mean, you got Michigan and Penn State on the road, and as well as Ohio State, but you have them at home. Yeah, so you got a couple of tough games in there, certainly. I mean, Wisconsin's in there as well. But your record estimation for Maryland is going to be 3-9 to 5-7. Once again, we'll be able to give you guys an actual record prediction once we get into the summer, and we're giving you guys all of our actual predictions for these teams. But nonetheless, it's kind of schedule previews are what we do in the early parts of the earlier parts of the offseason, just to give you an idea of what you can expect of your team in the next season. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on Maryland in the comments below. Let me know whether you disagree with one of these or not. But yeah, thank you guys all for watching once again. Stay tuned for more from Sports Central, and I will see you all later.